So welcome everybody to the Mann Uprising podcast. Yes, you heard that right. The Mann Uprising podcast. We are official. We are launched. And I know you've heard from me, Baruch HaLevi, also known as B, but you haven't heard in a while from my good friend and co-founder, one of our co-founders of Mann Uprising, Dave Mann. Dave, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. This is long overdue. We did this like a year ago, right? Was it the last time we did a podcast together?
Probably 6 months, but it was fun.
6 months, and we have talked about it every month, if not every week, for the past 6 months. Here we are, ready to roll. So we're going to be doing this. I'm going to commit on air, man. Millions of listeners right now. We're going to be doing this at minimum once a month, maybe more. Can we commit to that?
I'm all in. I love it.
I know you are. And I guess that's a good segue into our conversation today. I just gave Dave about 67 seconds to prepare on this topic, and it's about being all in. I didn't really name it as such, but that's what it is. And specifically for men in what we call the second half of life, midlife onwards, being all in. And I'm going to just set it up, and then Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you for some insights. And I'm going to do another coming out. I did this on my last podcast, and I did a very short conversation, but I came out to my audience that I watched The Golden Bachelorette. Have you watched The Golden Bachelorette, Dave?
Yes, I have.
Oh my God. So we both came out. So I promised I would never watch The Bachelorette. I just thought it was garbage. I just saw my wife watches every single episode, and it was a source of tension in our lives. And then one of our brothers from Man Uprising, Chuck, said, B, you have to watch The Golden Bachelorette. I'm like, Chuck, there's no way. He said, you have to. I trust Chuck, so I said, fine. And about halfway through the first episode, boom, it hit me. So before I talk about, because people have already heard my opinion on it, what do you think hit me, or what hit you, Dave, when watching The Golden Bachelorette?
I feel like I'm going to get myself in trouble. What hit me, and I've only watched it probably a couple times with my wife, what hit me is how inauthentic the men were and how much ego and posturing that was going on, versus I didn't see, and maybe I didn't watch the same episodes, I didn't see like the depth of the men. And again, I'm going to get in trouble, but why are they coming on the show in the first place?
Well, I totally agree. It's about as contrived as it gets, right? Trying to find the one in a competition. It's just kind of stupid premise. And we're coming at different angles, which is good. I love it. So look, it took me about half of an episode, maybe an episode, to get rolling. I'd say by second, third, I was pretty into it. I have to admit, I fast forwarded through all of the dates because I just wanted to see one thing. I wanted to see when the guys were together in a room and starting to open up. And I agree with you that at first it's pretty awkward. And for anybody who doesn't know, The Golden Bachelorette is the same premise as The Bachelorette, only fast forward to the 60s and 70s. I think she was like 61 and they were like 60s to early 70s. But what I saw was a different type of man in the second half of life, at least the potential for a different type of man. And I saw them when they were coming together, they were starting to open up. Maybe it was later on in the season, the episodes, I don't know. But they were starting to tear up. They were starting to share. And by the middle of it, from not all of them, but for many of them, it felt a lot less about her and a lot more about them.
That's interesting. I'm glad you had that takeaway. I watched more of the first season, and my wife filled me in that he was not honest and was dating other people, and that relationship fell apart. So for me, it was like, how is this any different than dudes in their 20s?
So you're referring to The Bachelor.
Oh, okay.
And
I have seen the second one, yeah, also.
Yeah, The Bachelorette is when they're all vying for her. She's the Bachelorette.
Got it.
I don't know I didn't watch the other one, but it's a segue into what I see every time we do a men's group. And I want to really talk about it from your perspective, because you've been doing peer groups way longer than I have. I've run them, but not as methodical or systematic as your experience has been. But what I've seen is that when men come together in a group, again, this second part of life, they start to open up in ways that I don't think they could have. Certainly they didn't. I certainly didn't. I can only speak for myself in the first half of life. I would love to hear your experience with peer groups in general, and now with Man Uprising men's groups and men coming together.
The first experience I guess I could say that makes me realize that I've been doing this for a long time was just being in sports and just being constantly in a team with with other boys slash men. I played sports through college, and just that that early experience of just how locker rooms operate, and how there's probably again more ego and posturing, and then creating relationships inside of that do have some depth. And having not thought about this before in the way that you just asked me, I remember not enjoying the big group experience, but really loving the different personalities and the depth and vulnerability of some of the guys that I became friends with and played sports with. And it was meaningful. It's really meaningful. And then fast forward to my 20s, when I was probably as banged up as any other time in my life, and my stepdad got me into a program called Sterling Institute of Relationship, which had so many crazy dynamics. It was just wild. It was my first experience of peer group. We met once a week in the evening. It was a group of about 10 or 12 men. And, I was really young when I started, and, did that for years. That transitioned into Vistage, a business, peer group, transitioned into EO, and, I've been doing it, I guess, ever since. So, I guess at the risk of using the word need, which I don't prefer, I have enjoyed it and gotten so much out of it for so long. And I'm just realizing right now that it's become my go-to. And actually today I reached out to a guy in a dad's group on Facebook, because he's got about 500 members. It's a nonprofit, and they're operating it in the county I live in. And it's incredible the interaction that these guys are having without any training. I mean, I had quite a bit of training along the way, and of course, therapy and life and being introspective. I think anyway, being interested in learning and growing anyway. I've gotten a ton out of it, but I'm watching guys without any training interact. That it's really amazing. So I think, to your point, this is moving in a direction. This has energy. Male peer groups, and peer groups in general, obviously, but watching how many men are really getting something out of this, it's inspiring.
Well, you're an interesting case study, if you will, because you come from, you're not your stereotypical peer group or men's group kind of guy. You came from a pretty rough, masculine background. You were a serious football player. You played collegiate football. Where'd you play again?
UC Davis, and then later Whittier College.
And so, that's not the stereotype of a guy who then makes his way over to a men's group. And so, I really like using you in some ways as a poster child for our Man Uprising peer groups, because I think there's a lot of resistance out there that these things are. I don't want to say soft, because I do want to be soft. I want to be vulnerable, but soft as in, again, contrived, forced, or uncomfortably soft, like sort of going to another extreme where it's almost you're expected to open up, you're told to open up. There's this culture of again, I don't know a better word, but softness. But you still maintain this sort of masculine side, healthy strength, while opening up and being vulnerable. Could you speak to that?
It's probably by accident. It's old habits meeting with new learning. Yeah, I was raised in a really masculine environment. I had a really, really strong dad. He was a former college football player. Born in the early 40s, and just that era of men go out and do the hunting and killing, and our women stay home and prepare the feast and take care of the children. And so that was the environment I grew up in.
And you grew up on a ranch, right?
I grew up on a dairy. And so, I was surrounded by just really blue collar, hardworking folks, both men and women. My experience with especially my grandmothers, both of my grandmothers, they were really tough and really hardworking and yet really kind and loving. They were great examples. Same with my grandfathers, just guys that just got up and went to work and probably didn't cry about it, didn't talk about it. And then, the dysfunction kind of started with my parents and how they operated. And, that led to, lots of trauma for me, that led to lots of, curiosity and growing. And so if I battle, I'm probably battling against the old bad habits. The environment that I grew up in was not completely healthy, and I definitely felt loved. And so I happened to marry a really strong woman who's probably less, in fact, she is less vulnerable than I am. And she was also raised in a tough environment. And so we've worked really hard to try to find that softness and that vulnerability. And it's really comes natural for me. So, if anything, I have to kind of harness it because I think it might scare people, but it's very comfortable for me to live in vulnerability. And it's more, I'm less efficient when I am living more in kind of my, to use my daughter's terms, that toxic masculinity side. I don't think I'm as effective in my life, but it's part of my default.
And we're going to do a whole show or series of shows on toxic masculinity, because I would challenge your daughter. I would challenge anybody. And there's a lot of people out there who it's sort of like saying toxic love. If it's toxic, it's not love. If it's toxic, it's not masculinity. I know what she's saying, and you described it, right? It's that sort of hard edge. I don't have emotions. Certainly, you're not going to see them. You're not going to see my vulnerabilities. You're not going to see my weaknesses. But what you have shown me, and what I've seen with the other guys in Mann Uprising, is that that's not masculinity. Masculinity is what I said. It's bringing that strength that I've gathered, your dad, certainly your grandfathers have, to the table, and bringing that openness and that softness to the table. And it's not exchanging one for the other.
Yeah.
Right.
I know what it looks like because there's a couple of men in my life that operate perfectly that way. They have that balance. I haven't figured it out yet. I still get pretty extreme. I still get angry, which again, my definition of my own anger is just fear and sadness, rejection, lack of respect. And so I'm constantly thinking about how to find that, equilibrium between where masculinity serves me and where vulnerability just feels so comfortable. It's so perfect for what I love and how I want to operate.
And I would argue that they both have their place, right? Like, I want that strength, that hard edge at times. We need it. We live in a hard world, right? If there's a burglar at your door, I want you to have access to that intensity, anger, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it's just, like pornography, they say, when you see it. And when that thing comes up, like, I want that, but I also don't want to be governed by it.
Yeah. And I hear you. And I don't feel governed by it. I feel like it's a super slippery slope for me. And, if I could operate in a silo, it would be easy, but I can't. And I'm surrounded by, I've got I'm very involved with my mom, who's widowed at this point, and then my wife and my two daughters. So, when I'm in my, most vulnerable, the guard is down, I'm most raw is, I'm around the people that have the most ability to poke at me or affect me. And, just kind of know how to push my buttons. So how I react in those environments, that's where the work is for me. Talking to other men that are curious about this journey, man, all day long, love it. So easy. I've got that part. It's how can I communicate, with the people that know me and love me the most, and vice versa, in a healthy, loving, equal, masculine / vulnerable context.
So true. Well, I kind of see the the peer groups, the Man Uprising peer groups, as my opportunity to go to the gym and
Yeah.
work on these muscles, and so that when I come home, I'm a little stronger, so I don't slip, I don't react quite as much,
Yeah.
right? It's not a linear path, but that's how I experience it. When I come home from those groups, I'm just able to respond a little bit more and react a little bit less.
I couldn't agree more. It's been that way since the beginning. We used to joke a lot, like it always sneaks up on you. The meetings, it seems like they happen so fast, and there's always kind of that dread of, oh, I'm not prepared, and I got to stop half of my day, and then you walk out of there and you're like, oh my goodness, what a change, what a shot in the arm. I feel like $1 million, and there's just there's a strength and a brotherhood, and I'm in peer groups with women too, on the other side of it, and I get just as much out of those experiences as well, and I always come back better. My wife always says that to me. You're always better after a peer group meeting. So for me, it's, again, I'm using a lot of the terminology, but safe, brave place to go and circle up in a confidential environment, and really kind of practice and test, what's going on with me, with us, experience, share, greatest thing ever for how I've learned and how I like to learn.
Explain
Uh,
that.
so the low hanging fruit is, and I don't know what the data is, but I remember hearing, like, by the time we're 6 years old or 10 years old, we've been told no, like, 279,000 times in our life, right? So we grow up in an environment of just advice, like, this is how you do it, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. It's how my parents certainly operated, coaches, teachers, bless you. And then you get into peer group, and specifically, I learned this in EO, which was Gestalt protocol, which is, we don't ever tell anybody what to do. We just share an experience that might be similar to what somebody else is sharing. And maybe there's a learning in that for that person. And that game changer. I learned that in 2006 for the first time. And it's just changed my entire operating system, my wife, my kids. It is so unappealing when somebody tells somebody else what to do. I cannot stand it.
So let's come back to vulnerability. So how does that impact your vulnerability when somebody does shift from experience to telling?
When somebody tells me, or what do you mean?
No, when you're in our peer groups and somebody, we slip back into telling mode.
My guard goes up. I get frustrated. It's like, it drives me crazy. It's,
why do you think that is? Why?
Fingernails on a chalkboard. Can I cuss on this?
Yeah, of course. It's Man Uprising.
Who the fuck has a right to tell anybody else what to do? Which one of us has it figured out? Like, why on earth would you think that what you have to say or have to tell somebody else has any, impact on them? It's like, you're not in their shoes. You're not in their life. You're not even beginning you're shutting down empathy. And I know this is another, buzzword for us, but if you really want to connect with somebody in a vulnerable way, it's try to feel what they're feeling. Try to understand what they might be going through. Think of a time when you were in the same situation. Tell that story. And as we've all seen American Pie, it's, this one time at band camp. It's the greatest way to start it off.
I'll challenge on that idea just a little bit. I agree with almost all of it, but I have seen you invite a tell me what to do kind of a moment. And there are those moments where we invite somebody to say, like, tell me what to do. So what's the difference?
So without you giving me a specific example, I don't think it works. I know there's certain, exercises within a peer group, where we can say, hey, if I was in your shoes, what I would do is, which is, essentially veiled advice. Some guys like that. I don't. If you and I are talking about something technical, hey, B, I can't figure out how to get, my microphone connected to my computer. Tell me what to do. That's the perfect time.
Oh yeah,
But he,
I'm definitely not experienced sharing to help you with your tech problems.
yeah, exactly. So, but if, hey, B, my wife and I are really not getting along and I'm really super frustrated and I can't figure out how to move the needle. And for you to say, well, what you need to do is, it's like, that just takes me back to my dad and mom, it takes me back to
Yeah,
everybody that's ever had an opinion that was unsolicited, right?
yeah, no, that's fair. And I guess you're helping me clarify what I'm asking is there are moments when I'll experience share, when I need to hear somebody's objective truth, even if it hurts about how they perceive what I'm doing. But for me, anyways, it can only come when I invite it, right? I've asked you before, hey, I'm lost, I'm confused. I don't, tell me the truth. Tell me the truth of how you see how I'm moving through my life. You're right. It isn't telling me what to do nearly as much as describing the truth that you see. And we have enough built up capital in the bank that I've invited it and I trust it and I receive it.
Yeah, and you're talking about, my hunch is you're talking about a one-on-one situation,
It's
where we're in a very confidential and safe, trusting environment. If you're in a peer group setting, it's my experience and contention that there's never an appropriate time to tell when you're in a group setting. It just creates too much group think, and I've seen it be very damaging. I've seen men, become really hurt by that process.
okay.
It's and back to this group that I'm watching from afar on Facebook that I'm just so impressed with. You've got a lot of, caring, probably deep thinkers, probably experienced guys that have no context or training around how to help another man. And so another man might be suggesting that they're having a major marital crisis, and to have a bunch of yahoos be like, what you need to do is, kick her ass to the curb. You got this. You go find somebody else. It's like, no, 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 no. That's the worst thing you could freaking tell this guy. So it's more from that context of like, we gotta have guardrails up when we do this stuff. It's too important. There's marriages and children and future generations are on the line here.
Lives are on the line, right? People
Lives
are
are on the line.
at
Well
a
said.
sometimes existential crossroads.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Um, so what are some other things in your experience that shut down vulnerability inside a peer group, or in general, but we're talking especially man uprising peer groups?
This has been a new, I guess, experience and phenomenon that you and I have talked about recently, which is I've spent so many years in peer groups and teasing and making fun of each other is kind of part of the banter. And I don't know if I'm hitting another phase or if I'm becoming more sensitive, but there's some others that I'm listening to and watching and observing, and I'm feeling it too. It's like, I don't know if teasing is appropriate anymore. I think that changes the level of vulnerability that you can achieve. I'm kind of experimenting with it. I'm trying to figure out myself. Again, I look at these men in my lives that I think have this equilibrium of vulnerability and masculinity. And when I think critically about them, they don't tease. They don't make fun of each other. They can laugh and have a good time, but it's always in a loving and kind way. I'm interested in that. I think that the teasing that I've experienced, both as a receiver and a giver, always came from insecurity, lack of confidence, environment. And I'm just curious. I want to learn and grow. And if there's a better way and I can be a more effective leader, if I can help somebody also, if I could have a bigger impact in their life, and there isn't a place for teasing and and making fun of one another or taking a shot at each other, I like that. I'm really interested in that. So that
Yeah,
to me is the biggest topic right now.
that's really cool. And we have a little ritual now that we do where we just sort of tap on our hearts, especially when a guy's using it to deflect um, in a peer group setting, using it to deflect the uncomfortable feelings it's bringing up. And so we just kind of pat on our heart a little bit as a reminder, like, let's get back to the heart, right? We don't have to,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a locker room.
Yeah. It's hard. It's really hard, man. I mean, these are we're talking about old habits too, right? I mean, we're all in at least our circles in our 50s, and we're talking about breaking some habits. But I think it's so worthwhile. We've all put in so much work to get to this point why stop now? Let's keep learning. Let's keep evolving.
Well, I think it's even harder than habits. They're defense mechanisms, right? It's
Yeah.
how we protect ourselves back in the playground or back in the ball field or wherever it is. I mean, it is so hard for me. I've been working so hard at getting away from it, but it is, in some ways it saved me like it does everybody.
Self-preservation. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then it stops saving you and it starts imprisoning you.
Well, I think too, we become, um, it becomes, like we're treating every relationship like we treated the one before, right? So if that we had a relationship where, teasing was always, a part of a part of our routine, and, maybe it comes from a good place, maybe not. And then we apply that to the next relationship and so on and so forth. And some of those relationships might have been hurtful. There might have been, we all have old friends and old relatives that's just kind of part of how you communicated with one another. Doesn't mean it was healthy. It doesn't mean that our I love that there's a reason, a season, or a lifetime. I'm looking at every relationship I have now of, is this a lifetime or is this just a season? Or is it just a reason? And so to get away from relationships that maybe weren't as healthy or don't serve me today like they maybe did at one time, I'm good with that. Like, I really want to explore that. And if you just use you and I as an example, we're building a trusting relationship where, if you feel secure and I feel secure and we're both confident that our relationship is, for a lifetime, then there's less reason to defend when one of us has maybe a differing opinion. One of the greatest ways that I find to relate to men is when somebody that cares about me says, "Hey, I really care about you, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but you're showing up late, or your lack of detail is affecting how we're operating, or I feel like you're not taking the time that I need you to take on this particular item or issue." That feels loving to me. That feels vulnerable to me. That's how I love to be communicated to, and vice versa.
That's beautiful. That's a better way of getting to what I was moving towards before, which is, bearing witness to somebody's life, to your life. I owe it to you to reflect back what I see because I care about you and you and I have built that trust, right? That's different than telling. That's different than shoulding.
It's amazing. I mean, and think about the power in that and how different that is than what else, the other relationships that we've experienced up to now. It's a game changer. And that's where I think peer group has that ability. I mean, everything I'm saying came out of learning inside of peer groups, learning from mentors I've met through peer groups.
But it's a really delicate ecosystem where it can go south real quick if you don't shut down the banter, the teasing, the poking, and I'm not the sage on the stage here. Like, I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm the 8 hole. I really have a hard time not getting into the locker room banter to the point where one of the guys in our peer group, I won't name him, but he and I were like just doing banter more than we were doing the heartfelt stuff. And Dave, you called us out on it and said, guys, like, enough, man. This is not that space. This is not what we set out to do.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that level of direct experience, not even experience, just kind of a insight into
Observation. Yeah.
observation
Yeah.
into what could be.
Yeah. And I've been so fortunate to be in so many peer groups for so long. And, I've seen all sides of it. Furthermore, for a while, I helped train peer groups and launch peer groups. And so I'm really interested in the process. And I've had great mentors that have, taught me based on their own leading of peer groups. And I watch how they operate, and they're older than us. So I keep thinking that, as we age, we're going to improve and evolve the same way. But there's such a deep, understood level of confidence when you can get to that place of just stability. There's no ego. It's just all about commitment. Guys, I'm investing this time today because I want to get better. I want all of us to get better in our lives. And it's beautiful, man. It's life changing. And I've seen it not only for my own life. I'm a much healthier, happier, stable person because of it. I've seen it happen for so many others as well.
It's been one of the greatest gifts or rewards of my lifetime to be bringing men together now in this formal way to commit to everything we've just been describing and to learn and to, it's called, Cam calls it, I know it's called by others, intimacy,
Yeah.
creating instant intimacy, that you can just accelerate this process with this framework, with these agreements, with this commitment, with these ground rules. So it isn't stifling or suffocating when you go into these peer groups. I find it liberating.
Yeah, and most, guys typically, have that armor on when they walk in. I mean, that's just, again, goes back to the beginning of the conversation of, we're all built that way, right? And we all come most likely based on our ages from, from that type of background as well. And one of the easiest ways for me to describe it when somebody's questioning why we're doing, the things that we're doing, it's, you got to trust the process. I mean, you have to just be open and vulnerable and trust the process, because it takes time. It's new, it's awkward, it's clumsy and clunky in the beginning. And I did the same thing. I remember questioning, everything about it in the beginning as well. And somebody that I respected came to me and said, "Hey man, you got to let this marinate. Like, just take a breath, know that you're here because we care about you, and just see where it goes." And that's what I needed to hear. So, to others out there that are in the early stages of peer group, please trust me when I say trust the process. You'll receive an ROI that far exceeds anything you could have ever imagined.
That's a good segue to wrap up and share with everybody listening that we are now running not only peer groups, Man Uprising peer groups here in Denver, Colorado, but virtually. And so we're really excited. We're rolling out our first virtual group. And it won't be our last, because that's the world we live in. We do see virtual, I think, as a pathway to then come to a theater near you. So once a guy's been doing it for a while, he can find 8 other brothers in his hometown, and he can have his virtual peer group, because by then the bonds will be deep. But then he can also facilitate one in his community. So if you're interested in virtual, if you're interested here in Denver, Colorado in person, or if you're just interested in not necessarily the peer group or not ready for it, you can come over to the Man Cave. Man Cave is an online portal, totally complimentary, a ton of content in there, a ton of good guys. And you can just kind of come in and hang out there and get a sense of, our philosophy and the culture. And you can also test drive a peer group, as we call it, an UpX, a Man Uprising experience. And that's just a 2-hour, no commitment after that test drive opportunity. It's all virtual to come and see what, experience, like Dave was talking about, as opposed to us telling you what it's like. Come experience it for yourself. And at the very least, you'll have meaningful 2 hours and meet some really good dudes. And at the very most, probably my money is that you'll want to continue on. And if you do continue on, it's a once a month commitment, 4 hours, again, either virtually or in person in Colorado. And I believe it'll be the best 4 hours you've ever spent in your life.
Life is hard enough. There's no reason to do it alone.
I love that. That should be on our website.
You can have it.
So with that, we're going to wrap it up. You can jump over to manuprising.org, manuprising.org. It'll get you over to the Man Cave, and you can always reach out to either of us, Baruch at manuprising.org, or Dave, Dave at manuprising.org, and we would love to connect with you. So thanks for being on, brother.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate it. That was fun.
All right, everybody listening, and the next time we see you, we'll be back hopefully with a guest. We're going to be bringing guests into our studios and much more. So stay tuned and rise up in the second half of life.